I will first start off by saying that this episode really impressed me. The story format that is in this episode follows the style of writing that you would usually see in a thriller. The main characters, in this case Gideon and Teresa, are plunged into a dangerous situation where they must use all their wits and resources to find a way out. The story concept for this episode was simple to understand and I feel was brilliantly executed. Unlike the previous episodes, in this episode there is only one storyline which involves the main and secondary characters of the show. That storyline is to deal with the threat to Gideon. There is little to no backstory or character development in this episode, but the episode gets away with it by creating a suspenseful plot that focuses on trying to figure out what is going to happen next. The single storyline can be divided into two parts. The first part with Gideon and Teresa being attacked at Gideon's home. The second is the police being distracted by the criminals away from the threat at Gideon's home. I found the first part of the main story to be really entertaining and thought that the writer did a good job of showing Gideon's intelligence and skills at work. I liked how the writer wrote the progression of Gideon and Teresa's part of the story, having them go through a constant cycle of trying to thwart their attackers and constantly encountering problems that force them to come up with new ideas. The second part of the main story focuses on the secondary characters trying to figure out what the masked men are trying to do in the city. One thing I must give praise for is the way they portrayed Roderick in this episode. Most of the time, Roderick would mention his experience doing tours in Iraq, and it wouldn't really do much other than to give a small amount of backstory. In this episode, Roderick's mention of his experience there appears to be more relevant as his experience dealing with bombs over there can be reflected at the bomb threat in this episode. I also like the way they made Roderick more serious in this episode, as in the past episodes he sometimes acts in a way that doesn't coincide with the story he's involved in. One of my favorite parts of this episode was Gideon's reaction to the open threats against him. I thought him saying that the person making the threats against him were probably on a computer in his mother's basement to be hilarious. One of the biggest surprises for me in this episode was finding out that the criminals had a legit reason for trying to take out Gideon. I honestly thought that Gideon was purely the good guy, but it turns out that in his secret laboratory he created a program that could invade people's privacy. The ending left me wanting to see more. After seeing Danny reveal himself to Gideon and the police force, we get the feeling that something big is going to happen in later episodes.